The Science of Jetting, take 16. No, it's not really 16. I am having to record on my iPhone though because my camera went dead. So, we are here to talk about jetting though. We got a little pictorial here with a nozzle and some main jets. This is what a pilot jet looks like, and this is a needle jet. The diameter of the needle jet and the taper of it control the flow of the fuel through the main jet, and then we have these little grooves up here for clips, or a clip. So that's how we control the flow of fuel in a typical motocross bike engine. But these principles, they apply to like pretty much all engines: 4-stroke, 2-stroke, chainsaw, leaf blower, weed whacker, road racing bike. A little bit about me. I think I started racing motocross in 1975. This is actually the very first bike that I ever like jetted myself, and turned it into a rocket ship. A lot of hole shots with this bike, including the one right here where everyone's eating my dust. A 1980 YZ125, last of the air-cooled bikes back then. It was a great bike though, real fast. I raced with the World Karting Association for quite a few years. This is a picture from Indianapolis, and this is a Yamaha 100. It was a pretty tweaked engine though, and it was fast. And the interesting part about these type of engines, they don't have a carburetor with a pilot and a needle and a main jet. They have a low speed and a high speed. I think this had a Walbro carburetor on it. And you could actually like reach over your shoulder while you're going down a straightaway and lean it out a little bit to get a few more revs out of it down the straightaway. But if you went too far, you obviously risked a seizure. So I spent quite a few years motorcycle road racing, and this is from 2003 when I was racing the AMA Pro 250 Grand Prix National Championship. This is a TZ250 twin cylinder 2-stroke 40 millimeter. They were like bored out carburetors from something I don't exactly know, but they were PowerJet McCuneys, I know that. And these things severely tweaked. I think this bike actually dynoed at something around 88 horsepower when you're at Daytona. And it was capable of doing 160 miles an hour when it was fully tuned. A lot of fun. We did a lot of jetting in those days, working to try and squeeze tenths out of our lap times. So after the 250 Grand Prix was dissolved in 2003, I raced this kitted TZ125, and this thing had the same size carburetor as the TZ. This bike had a Kaheen carburetor that's the same size as a YZ250. So heavy breather for sure, and it was a ton of fun to ride. Had some good races with that. Nowadays, I just have a couple of YZ dirt bikes, motocross bikes. This is my YZ125, and that's my YZ250. And they don't just sit around in the garage getting polished, take them out to the motocross tracks around here and roost it up a bit. So what is jetting, right? In its simplest term, it's the mechanic trying to optimize the engine in order to compensate for changes in weather, right? And when I say that because we should not always be like trying to find some optimal setting, a pie in the sky, so to speak. It's going to be like, you work on the bike and you get it so it idles good, it pulls off, idle well, it runs through the mid-range with good strong power and smoothness, and revs out with a good strong power band and a good over rev if that's the way the engine is configured, and that would be considered like a baseline setting. Some folks go to great lengths to try and find the perfect baseline setting, and I mean, back in 250 Grand Prix days, there were many teams that would be sitting on dynos for like a half an hour or an hour every day trying to find that perfect setting, because, well, I mean, when you're spending thousands and thousands of dollars, you want to make sure that you're squeezing every last half of a horsepower out of the motor in order to like be on pole position or win the race, right? So essentially what we're looking at here is the stoichiometric graph, where it shows our power curve, and then we have this other curve down below for fuel consumption and fuel economy. And let's face it, we don't care about this at all. What we're concerned about is this: maximum power. We don't want to go into this lean condition, because when we go into the lean condition, we lose power, first of all, but we also generate a lot of heat, and we risk detonation, and we risk piston seizure, okay? So we want to stay away from this side. We also really don't want to go too far into the rich here, because then we lose like responsiveness, and our engine runs like ass, and we're not going to go anywhere fast with a hugely rich engine, right? So we're always trying to stay right in this little area right here, okay? And that's at 12.6 to 1. So, variables that affect jetting. Ideally, we don't want to be dealing with this at all, right? The formulation of our fuel, well, it can vary from like A to Z, right? A being like 93 pump gas, and Z being, Sunoco 110, right? And anything in between, as far as like, I don't know if you've ever run like avgas, 100 low lead avgas. It's a good fuel as far as like high quality, but it's probably not the best thing to run in your motocross bike. Generally, motocross bikes don't need anything much more than like 95 octane, and so you're sort of like wasting octane and going down a road with little return when you're like throwing straight race gas into your bike. You're better off like mixing it 50-50. And I know a lot of people don't like using current gasoline formulations, with the alcohol in it. But a lot of places you can find, at least around here, you can find ethanol-free fuel. And it's, I think around here it's 91 octane. So that's usually what I do, is I mix Sunoco 110 with the 91, and I figure I'm ending up somewhere in the high 90s as far as octane goes. The other big variable as far as fuel is oxidized versus conventional. Conventional being like VP C12 or something else that's not oxygenated versus like VP's U4 or MR8. Those can add a lot of oxygen into the equation, which can significantly affect the way the bike runs. The other column has like oil mix ratios. So we're talking about the scenario where you run 24-1, but your buddy likes to run 50-1, and maybe you like run out of gas or something, or and you have to borrow some 50-1 from your buddy, and you're wondering if that's going to require a jetting change. A lot of people think that is a large difference. In reality, there's only a 2% difference between 24-1 and 50-1. So 2% oil difference, is that going to make a big difference as far as like the viscosity of the fuel? Probably not, right? And it's a small difference as far as like actual volume, right? You'll hear some people argue that, well, a 24-1 mixture has like less fuel in it than a 50-1 mix, right? And so my bike's going to run like a lot stronger with 50-1, which is not really, I don't believe that's accurate. But we don't have to get into that part. As far as viscosity goes, if your buddy is like running a 50-1 low viscosity synthetic, and you're running a 24-1, let's say a high viscosity racing caster or something like that, that could conceivably create enough of a viscosity difference in the fuel oil mix where you may have to, or may not have to, but may benefit from a jetting change. So just keep that in mind. But what we want to do is minimize these variables so we only have to deal with these, right? And as far as the air variables, we have altitude, which is one of the big ones if you travel a lot. Temperature, well, things change a lot, right? Go out in the morning at 8 a.m., it could be like 60 degrees out for practice, and then your race happens at 3 p.m. in the afternoon and it's 85 or even 90. That's going to create a pretty significant change in the air density, the available oxygen in the air, where you could benefit from a change in jetting. Humidity and barometric pressure, not really that much of an effect. There's just, you'll see it if you look at RAD calculations. It doesn't really have that much effect on the number. You might see like a 1% change or something like that. So usually humidity and barometric pressure don't change unless something else is changing anyway. So, but we factor all these into the same equation when we're working with jetting, and we're going to talk about that in just a moment. So some general rules of thumb here. Unless we're building a custom engine or swapping like some sort of crazy carburetor onto our engine where we're starting from scratch, we should really never be in no man's land, okay? OEM stock jets delivered with MX bikes are generally very close to optimal at sea level with conventional fuel and should be considered a good baseline, okay? If you're not at sea level, well, it's not going to be a great baseline for you, but you should be able to determine what you need to change in order to make it a good baseline, or in order to come up with a good baseline, just by knowing this right here. Sea level, conventional fuel. Try not to change your fuel and oil all the time. Like I said, we don't need to try and make this complicated by having like all these different variables in the previous table, right? We only want to try and jet based on changes in weather. So, pick a consistent and available fuel and oil, mix it the same all the time, and stick with it. And that'll make your whole life a lot easier. Okay? Some general rules of thumb as far as trying to find your baseline. Bogging off idle is usually a condition or an indication of lean, okay? So when you put it in first or second gear and you're trying to like roll it on and it's just going wah, wah when you throttle it on, you're probably gonna have to like put a different pilot jet in order to like get it to like accelerate off idle, okay? Stuttering at mid throttle is usually an indication of rich. So if you're going around a corner at partial throttle, like mid throttle or something like that, and it's not running smooth, it's going, all right? That's going to be indication that it's too rich and you're going to need to like drop your needle a little bit in order to make it clear up and like run smooth through the mid corner, okay? And force cycling at full throttle, we all know what that is. That's that sound like when you start up your chainsaw and you like pull the trigger and it revs up to like something a little bit less than its maximum RPM and then goes instead of right? That's force cycling. That's an indication of rich. We're going to want to reduce the size of the main jet when we hear that. Or, on the other hand, if it's tinny sounding or weak sounding at high full throttle, and it's like revving all the way out, right? That's going to be an indication it's lean, and we're going to want to like increase the size of the main jet. So once we end up finding our baseline, the best way to determine jetting changes from your baseline is going to be the relative air density value, okay? And you're wondering like, well, what's this relative air density value? So there's a lot of different gauges that you can buy out there. And there's a lot of like little calculators that you can buy. And when I first started like working with RAD, I had this like it was a little gauge about this big, sat in a little foam case. You'd open it up in the morning and look at it and say, we got big air, let's put a bigger jet in. Or, we got crappy air, we're gonna have to like reduce the size of our mains or something like that. I also used Palm Pilot many years ago when I had a weather station, so I would just like enter the values, the weather values into this little equation and it would spit out the number. Nowadays I use something on my phone, it's a little app and it works pretty good too. But I've been using that for like, oh my God, it had to be like 25 years now in order to determine what sort of changes I need to make when the weather changes. The app that I use on my phone is called Air Density and Radmeter Pro. You can find it on the App Store. It's not like a great app, but it gets the job done, which is really all you need. And some rules of thumb for rad values. Every 3% change in the rad value, whether it's up or down, represents approximately one main jet size. So if it goes up 3%, like maybe 90 to 93, then you're going to want to increase your main jet size. If it goes down from like 93 down to 90, then you're going to want to decrease your main jet size. Okay. As far as like needle, I used to go about 6% and then change the needle, and I would usually change a pilot jet after I got somewhere in the neighborhood of like 7 to 9%, because sometimes you can adjust the air screw to compensate for that. But once you get to like 9%, you're just take the pilot out, put a different one in. Okay, so I'm going to go forward here because what these are is screenshots from the weather app, or the what the hell's it called? Air Density and Radmeter Pro. And this is the actual weather window where you input values. So if you had a little weather station with you at the racetrack, you would enter the temperature, the atmospheric pressure, you slide your humidity thing back and forth here, and then enter your altitude, and then press go or press results, and it will spit out the number. This app also has like the automatic input where you can just like tap this and it says get weather from the local weather station, or whether that's an airport or something else, I don't know. And it will like gather up the altitude and the temperature and the pressure and the humidity, and then you press use this data, and it spits out this. And in this particular case, the relative air density was 99.9%, which is usually what you would see if you were sitting on the beach and it was 60 degrees out. The beach meaning the ocean, okay? So sea level at 60 degrees, you usually see 100% here. And this is sort of reflected right here with the density, altitude, and the virtual temperature here too. So, but this would be considered big air. And, you know, if your baseline was determined or arrived at when you, the relative air density was say 94%, you would want, and you saw this the morning at practice, you'd definitely want to increase the main jet size a couple, and you would feel a big difference, I'm sure. So, good stuff. Compare that to, so this would be something like you might see at Budds Creek, like this time of the year, right? Where it was like approximately 60 or something like 65 in the morning, and you're sitting at 150 feet above sea level. You would probably see this sort of a number at Budds Creek this time of year. Compare that to this number. So this is a screen where I changed the altitude to 5,280 to simulate like Eli Tomac's home track at Thunder Valley. And I know it says density altitude 63, but that's because it factors in the actual pressure. So the relative density dropped to 83% here. That's huge. That's 17 points, 17%. And remember, we were talking about the changes that are required, 3% for a main jet. So I'd be like going down 5 main jets if I saw this number. And in fact, I've been in this boat before because I think it was in '03, the 250 Grand Prix raced at Pikes Peak International Raceway, and we were using like ridiculously small jets in our bikes in order to make them run proper up there. So 17, you'd probably go down 2 clips on the needle jet and probably a couple pilot jets as well to make this bike run proper in here. So the same thing sort of happens if you like left the altitude the same and changed your temperature, you would see this number go down as well. There's a lot of adjusting if you're really serious about having the optimal performance on your bike, you know, and you know, when we just go club racing on the weekends for our district, some people are really serious about it, and some aren't, you know, and it all depends on what your expectations are. But a lot of us really like to make our bike run the way it's supposed to, and it helps. Sometimes it helps with our riding, right? So anyway, I hope this little presentation helped you out. Maybe it'll help you out with your racing, and like and subscribe, and feel free to ask some questions in the comments, and I'll do my best to answer them. Anyway, hope that helps. Thank you.